Hey everybody, this is Games Plus James and welcome back to our menu system tutorial series. So we've got, from our previous video, we've got our graphic settings all working correctly. Next thing we want to do is have some audio settings that we can use. So I'm going to go into my main menu here, into my options screen more specifically, and I'm going to start laying some things out. First thing I want to do though is actually these labels over here. They don't look quite nice center aligned like this. So I'm just going to take all of these labels and I'm going to align them to the right so they line up a bit better, and I'm going to drag them over like so. And I'm also on each one going to add a colon onto the end so they just make a little bit more sense like so. There we go. So next thing I'm going to do then is I'm going to take this graphics, I'm going to duplicate that and move it down to here and rename this to be audio. Probably audio with a D instead of an S would probably make more sense. There we go, we've got audio like so. Then I'm going to take, let's get this full screen one and use this, drag this down to here, and this is going to be a master volume slider. So I'm going to change the label here to be master volume like so, and then I'm going to remove this toggle and I'm going to add a UI slider like so. I'm going to get this slider, I'm going to scale it up 3 by 3 by 3, and then I'm going to just move the value into the middle just so we can see it a little bit better. Let's grab it over to the side here. I'm going to remove these images from it because I want to keep my graphic style looking nice and simple. So I'm going to remove the images from all of these like so, and then we're going to need to set up some colors. So first thing I'm going to do is go to the slider itself. I'm going to get the normal color for it to be the same as the buttons and stuff like that we've used. My highlight color, that's again, we'll just use the same colors from the buttons. So I'm going to copy this. Highlighted color will be the same green. Selected color will also be the same green. And press color, we're going to use this same blue color. Oops, copy it, not paste it. Over here, and boom, there we go. Okay, so that's that. For the background of the slider, for the fill area, I want to use the same gray, but I want to go a little bit darker. So let's go to about here. And then for the background, I want to again go darker. So I'm going to select that color and then go darker again. So now if I just play here, you see we got a slider that we can interact with and drag up and down. Very simple and easy to do. One extra thing I want to do is get this label that we have over the side here. I'm going to duplicate it. I'm going to align it to the left. I'm going to say that this is 100 for now. And I'm going to drag it way over here. And this is going to be the value for our slide so we can display it to the player. So let's copy this then. So that's our basic one set up. So let's just copy this twice down here. So we're going to have master volume, we're going to have a music volume, and we're going to have a sound effects volume. So let's just change the label for each of these just so that they're correct. We've got our master, we've got music, and we've got SFX like so. Okay, I'm also just going to rename these labels to be master vol music vol and SFX vol because I'm going to be assigning these later, so we wanted a way to identify between them. Okay, so that's our graphics for this little section set up. Let's just move it down a little bit as well actually. The next thing we need to do is make this actually do something. Now at the moment we don't have any audio system set up at all in the game. So we need to quickly do that to get that going. So I'm going to turn off my options screen here for the moment. And first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go and get some audio out of here. I'm going to get this music and I'm just going to put music 1 in here for some background music. And then we want to control the volume of this obviously, and how we can easily do that is using the audio mixer system in Unity. So I have mine open here, but if you go to Window and Audio Mixer, it'll pop the window open for you. And we're going to add a new mixer into our system. So if you hit the plus symbol here, we're going to call this the, not master, we're going to call it the main mixer. And that'll create a mixer object in your assets folder. You can see you've got main mixer here. And then in groups here, we've got master at the moment. I'm going to add 2 more. So I'm going to hit the plus symbol with master selected and say music. I'm going to make sure I select master again, and I'm going to call this SFX. So how this works is, if I go to music 1 here, for output, I'm going to select the music output because this is a music track. We obviously want that to happen. And what then happens is it'll pipe all the audio into this channel here. And then from here, because this is a child of the master, it'll go to the master file. So if I go ahead and play here, I turn off my mute audio. Let's turn off maximize as well, so that we can see with our main mixer selected, you can see the audio here is going from one to the other. And we can control their volumes. If I turn on edit and play mode here, I can turn this one down and it'll affect both of them because it's being sent into here, and I'm then sending this output to here. So, but if I change the master volume, all that does is affect it visually. You can see it turns the volume down here, but this is the one that's being fed out to us through the speakers. So that's how we can directly hear the sound changing. So we've basically got 2 ways of controlling the volume levels. Okay, so with that in mind then, we want to be able to control that with our sliders in our options screen. So to be able to do that, we need to expose the values for this. So if I select each one of these individually, if I go for master here, and if I right click on volume, and I can expose the volume. So we need to do that the same for each of these here. And you can see up here, we've got a value for exposed parameters. At the moment, we've got some very basic parameter names, which aren't really great. What we want to do is rename these. So the master one, we're going to rename to be, by double click on it, we can rename it to master vol. Then we're going to rename this one to be music vol. And then finally, you might guess it, SFX vol. So for sound effects. So now we have those 3 values available, we can start making changes to it. So let's go back into our options script. And up the top here, we're going to add a couple of variables in. So first thing we want to do is we're going to have a reference to that audio mixer. So for that, we're going to need to say using Unity engine.audio, so we can access the audio systems. And then down here, we can say public audio mixer, that we'll just call the mixer. And then we'll need references to those the labels that we want to put beside the slider so we can see them. So we're going to have TMP text. Oh, no, that is not the right one. Try this again. TMP text. There we go. We're going to have 3 here. So we're going to have the master label, the music label, and the SFX label. Okay, so let's go back down here, and after my apply graphics, I'm going to create some new functions. So we're going to have a public void set master volume, like so. And now we're also going to have 2 more, one for music and one for sound effects. But to make it easy, a lot of the stuff is going to be similar between these 3 functions. So we're actually just going to set up this first one first, and then we can copy them and make it a little bit easier to use them. So for our master volume, this function is going to be called whenever we make a change using the slider. So whenever we change the slider, first thing we want to do is update the text that's displayed. So I'm going to say our master label dot text will be equal to whatever value our slider currently has. Now, of course, we don't have a reference to the sliders themselves, so we should probably have that up here. So we're going to have public slider, there we go, that we're going to call master slider. We'll have one also for, of course, music slider and SFX slider, like so. So let's go back down here. And we're going to use whatever the slider value currently is. So we're going to say music slider dot value. and we're going to convert that to a string. So I'm just doing this like this so we can go ahead and test this out to see this in action. And it's going to bring up a couple of things that we need to cover when we do this. So let's just compile that. We'll turn on our options screen again so we can see stuff. And I'm going to leave maximize off so that we can see the mixer in effect at the same time when we get to that. So let's go to our options screen here, and we're going to put the, well, we might as well assign all these things in here while we're here. So put our slider in there, each of these sliders in. Then our labels, so master volume, music volume label, and sound effects volume label. Okay, so that's those working there. Then I'm going to go to my master volume slider. I'm going to, here where we have on value changed, I'm going to get the options screen and pop this one in here. Options screen, set master volume. Okay, so let's go ahead and play and we'll see what happens. When I make a change with this, curious, it's not, why is that not updating the correct value here? Oh, because I used music slider. There we go. Let's stick with master slider for that one. I don't know why I typed music slider in, but that's okay. Let's let this compile again and try one more time. I'm going to mute this because we don't actually need to listen to it. You can see when I slide this up and down, our value goes between those. So the reason it's going between 0 and 1 is because we have a minimum value here of 0, and a maximum value of 1. So that's all fine and grand, but obviously you might think, oh, well, we want it to be between 0 and 100. So let's say 0 and 100. So let's go ahead and play again. And now, there we go, perfect. We've got our numbers showing up between 0 and 100. That's all great. But there's a really important thing to note with the values we have in our mixer over here. You should hopefully notice that we have it a maximum of 20 and a minimum of minus 80. And that's the values that are used for the mixer system. So we want to apply our sliders kind of directly to the mixer. Our slider, what the information that we're sending to the mixer is more important than the information being displayed necessary to the player. So what we're actually going to do is set the minimum value to minus 80 and the maximum value to 100. I'm going to put the default value at 0. And then if I play, you'll see this will do the correct range, but we don't really want our players to see minus 80 up to 20. It's much better to actually display to the player 0 to 100. So with all of that information in mind, basically what we're going to do is in here, we're going to take the master slider value, we're going to put a bracket around it, and we're going to take whatever the value is and we're just going to add 80 to it. Because the maximum value of 20 we actually want to be 100, and the maximum value of minimum value of minus 80 we actually want to be 0. So when we add 80 to it, that'll work perfectly fine. But we also want to strip out all those decimal points because that's just extra information the player doesn't really need. So here we're going to say, before that bracket, we're just going to say math f dot round to int. So just round it to a whole number, the value that's being displayed. Okay, so that's all well and good. That's updating it visually for the player, but we also need to actually apply this to our mixer. So we're going to say here, the mixer that we have assigned, we want to set a float value, and we can only set exposed values. So the exposed value that we set before, or we created before for our master in the mixer, was the master vol. So we want to set that to be whatever our master slider value is. Okay, so let's save that. Let's go back in and we should hopefully see this now working correctly. Just before I do anything else, I'm also going to set the values on these other sliders to be minus 80 and 20 as well. And they'll also both have a default value of 0. So let's go back in here and play. And now, when I adjust this value, oh no, I got an error. Oh, I didn't assign the mixer. Hold on. Let's go to our options screen. We need to assign the mixer here. So I'm going to hit our little circle and select the main mixer. And let's try this one more time. Now when I make a change, there we go. You can see the value of this is going up and down. So it's all the way down the bottom and all the way up the top. Okay, so perfect. That's now working correctly. Let's do the same for our music and our sound effects. So as I said before, I'm going to simply copy this. And I'm just going to replace master with music. So we've got our music label, music slider, and the mixer, we're setting the music volume. Then finally we're going to have our set SFX volume. So this is going to be SFX label setting to the SFX slider value. The mixer, we're going to set the SFX volume to be the SFX value, and this should be the music value in here. So let's test all of these out then. So let this compile and play. And then when we play here, we can pull this one up and down. We can pull this one up and down, and it doesn't do anything, of course, because we haven't assigned those sliders to have a function. So let's get both of these, drag the options screen in here, set music volume, and then SFX, set SFX volume. Okay, so now there we go. You can see that one changes up and down and it affects this, and we can change this one up and down and it affects this one. So perfect. We now have our volumes working correctly. Now, of course, when we set those values, we want to be able to keep them between each session. So when your players start up the game again, we want to make sure that they keep the same music volume settings. So we know that the graphics are all automatically set by Unity, but we want to set these ones manually ourselves. So we're going to have to go back in here, and in this function, we're going to use the players pref system to store those values. So player prefs, if you haven't used them before, it's a way to kind of hard store some very basic information on your machine. So what we're going to do is, in our master volume, all we're going to do is whenever we make a change, we're going to say player prefs dot set float master volume, and we're going to set it to be whatever the mast slider dot value is. Oops, I did the wrong thing here, so that bracket shouldn't be there. We want to set the master volume to be master slider. Now we're using this name here. We're using the same ones we have up here just for convenience, but it doesn't actually matter what we call this, as long as it's identifying that this is for the master volume in the player prefs. So then we're going to do the same thing in our music and in our SFX, but of course we're going to change the name we're using. So we'll use music volume and music slider, and then SFX volume and SFX slider. Okay, so that will store the information, but of course we then need it to happen when the game starts again. Now, you might think, oh, we'll put it in the start function here, but the start function of the option screen won't be called when the game actually starts. The start function for the option screen will be called when the options are first activated. And of course, when you start the game here, the option screen isn't activated. So we don't want to put it in there. Instead, we're going to create a new object to handle this. We're going to create an empty called the audio manager. And we're going to create a script for this here. So create a C# script called audio manager and attach that on here. When it compiles, there we go. So let's open this up. This is going to need to use the Unity engine.audio system. And then in here, we're going to need access to the mixer. So public audio mixer that we'll call the mixer. And then in our start function here, we're going to say if the player prefs has a key, so we need to make sure that the key for master volume exists. So basically we do this check just to make sure we're not trying to set the value from the player prefs if it doesn't already exist, because of course this will also occur the very first time we run the game. So here we're then going to say the mixer set the float value for master volume to be whatever is in the player prefs get float master vol. And that's it. That's how we'll load the master volume information. So if I copy this and paste it in here, so again, then we'll have our music volume and music volume, and we'll have our SFX and SFX. And I'm going to remove this update loop because we're not going to use that in this one. So let's save that and let's go back in here. And once this compiles, we should see, if I go ahead and play now, so our values are all 0, 0, 0 here. If I go and make some changes to these, you can see they're -43, 21, and 11. Let's just stop this running. And now when I play, oh, well, we don't have the mixer, so that won't do very much. Let's get the main mixer there. And when we play, there we go. We have our 3 values stored correctly. There's one final little problem, which is if I open my options menu now, we have all the values set to their default, which obviously isn't great. So to fix that one, we'll go back into our options screen, and in the start function for here, we want this one to display, we want to basically make our sliders have the value of whatever the mixer currently is. And this is a little bit more complicated. It's, for some reason, you can't just say, hey, get the float value and tell me what it is. You have to actually store the float value as you get it. So we're going to create a holder value. So I'm going to create a float value that we just call volume. I'm going to set it to be 0. And then we say, okay, from the mixer, we want to get the float for master volume. And then we hit our little comma, and then we have to tell it that we want to send the value that we get, we want to send it out to the volume variable that we just created. So the volume variable, we're sending this information out to that. And then we can tell the master slider that value to be equal to whatever our volume is. So we're going to need to do that again a couple of times. So copy that, paste that in there, and we're just going to say, instead of the master volume, we'll say the music, and then the music slider, and then here we have the SFX volume and the SFX slider. So that will set the values for the sliders to be correct. Then we need to set the labels to be correct. So we have our master label. Actually, probably just copy from down here. Yes, just copy this one, pop that in there, copy this one, pop this up here, and finally copy the sound effects label and pop that in there. Okay, so let's save that. Let's go back in here. And now I can play, and this time when I open my options, there we go, we have the correct values set up. So now I can slide these up and down all I want, and it'll be stored, and it'll keep and retain the correct one between sessions. So perfect. There we go. That's our audio options and our full option system all working correctly for our game now. One thing I want to do is also make this option screen prefab so that we can use it on some of our other scenes later. But there you go. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. I'll be back soon with more parts of this tutorial series. Hope you've enjoyed it. Make sure you hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, leave some comments down below, and I'll be back very soon with more tutorial goodness. Goodbye.